Welcome to part 2 of how to stop feeding the chaos. A couple weeks ago, I shared a strategy with you to help you define what is in your control and what is not. The strategy was important because when you focus on what you cannot control, you feed the chaos instead of calming it. This week, I have another strategy for you that is also designed to calm the chaos. The strategy is to have standard operating procedures in place and to insist on those procedures being followed every time, including your most busy and chaotic times. It may seem obvious that having SOPs in place would help to keep things under control. However, I talk to owners and service advisors weekly who either don't have their SOPs fully developed or they're fully developed, but during the busiest moments when things start to get really chaotic, the staff starts to take shortcuts by not following SOPs. They think this will save time, but what it really does is feed and grow the chaos. I was coaching with a service advisor recently who, when I asked him about his week, he said it was extremely chaotic. So I asked him to tell me about it, and he said it was so crazy that at one point, 5 sets of keys had been tossed on his desk, not one of them labeled. He had no idea which keys belong to which vehicles. Because of that, during what was already a busier than expected day, he had to take the time to investigate and problem solve in order to determine where each set of keys belonged. This shop has a clear SOP for labeling keys as cars are checked in. But because of the chaos, the SOP was ignored, and as a result, the chaos was fed and as expected, it grew into more chaos. In other words, they fed the chaos by not following an SOP when it was most needed. Let's take a closer look at the importance of an SOP. According to Wikipedia, a standard operating procedure is a set of step-by-step instructions compiled by an organization to help workers carry out complex, routine operations. SOPs aim to achieve efficiency, quality output, and uniformity of performance, while reducing miscommunication and failure to comply with industry regulations. When you consider this definition of SOPs, their importance becomes pretty clear. Who doesn't want to achieve efficiency, quality output, and uniformity of performance? Who doesn't want to reduce miscommunication and failure to comply with regulations? Who doesn't want to stop drowning in chaos? SOPs are an extremely vital component of any shop, but when they are not followed, the chaos is fed, it grows, and you start to feel like this poor guy looks. If you are struggling to write effective SOPs, let me give you an idea of how it can be done. Step 1, delegate the task to the people who are actually doing the work that needs to be written into the SOP. For example, if you are developing an SOP on checking cars in, start by having the service advisors list everything they currently do to check cars in. Step 2, you review what the SAs come up with and add or subtract tasks as you see fit. Be sure to include each of the following categories in your SOPs: the purpose of the SOP, the frequency or how often the procedure is to be performed, who's responsible or assigned to that particular procedure, and the steps from beginning to end, and a signature and date line at the bottom. Step 3, distribute the draft SOP back to your employees for further review and revisions. Step 4, review any revisions your employees made and add your own final thoughts and revisions. And step 5, test the SOP by giving it to someone who does not usually do that particular task and ask them to complete the task just by following the newly written SOP. If they have any trouble completing the task, then add whatever detail or steps are needed to make successful completion of the task attainable for the tester. Watch the tester very carefully to see where the misses are. An SOP should be so detailed and descriptive that anyone can pick it up and complete the task just by following the written steps. Step 6, finalize the SOP, making any last necessary revisions, and then distribute the final copy with instructions that it be followed without fail. Best practice is to have anyone who is responsible for carrying out that SOP sign and date that they understand it and they agree to follow it. 2 final tips on writing an SOP. Use bullet points instead of paragraphs to make it easier to read, and remember to use concise language. There is a big difference between may, must, and should. Be clear about what you want so nothing is left up to interpretation. Here's an example of an SOP I helped a client write. At the top, you can see where their shop logo would go. Under that, you can see the purpose, frequency, who is responsible, and the first 5 steps of the procedure. This particular SOP details the steps for returning parts to WorldPack. You can see the steps are detailed enough for anyone to follow them. This page and the next explain how to return new parts. The next part of the SOP, steps 6 through 15, continue to explain in detail exactly how to return new parts. The next part of the SOP explains steps 1 through 9, how to return defective parts. Again, the steps are detailed enough that anyone could complete a return successfully. The last part of this SOP concludes with steps 9 and 10. Notice the bottom where it says WorldPack Returns SOP Approved, insert name of owner, insert name of shop. And then there is a signature line for the employees responsible for this procedure to sign and date. Keep in mind that SOPs should be living, breathing documents, which means they are never really finalized. Be willing to make changes as needed to make the procedure as effective as possible. Writing SOPs is a time-consuming task, but I promise you, you will get the time invested back many times over by providing detailed written instructions to your team. Just be sure to insist the SOPs be followed at all times. That is one big way to stop feeding the chaos in the shop. Thank you for watching, and thank you as always for coming alongside me as we build something better together.